Well, hello and welcome to the Mutual Fund Show. I'm your host, Neeraj Shah. And over the last 3 weeks, we've tried and done the different facets of what to do when you're investing in mutual funds. Remember, viewers, we started off with talking about what are the basic things that you should keep in mind while investing in funds, then how to choose a fund, more importantly. Then we also came to how to monitor the performance of the fund and the exit thereof. And then I thought to wrap up that what we would love to call a series, be really important to have a broader set of the do's and don'ts when it comes to mutual fund investing, especially in the current scenario. And therefore, two guests who join me today to speak about their assessments of the key do's and don'ts, Vishal Dhawan and Anand Ladda, both of them with us on the show. Gentlemen, both of you, good afternoon. Thanks for joining in. It can be a very broad brush thing and I will go to the individual things, but just a key thing which you believe people make a mistake while doing their investments or monitoring, and they shouldn't. And then we'll come to the individual facets, of course.
I feel one of the biggest mistakes which any investor can do in mutual fund is giving too much importance to the recent returns. When they see good returns in gold, they try and run after gold funds. When we see good return in equity, we try and chase equity. When we see good returns in long-term debt products, we feel that now it is perfect time to use debt funds, and we try and run after the debt products for that matter. I feel recency bias is one of the biggest mistakes which any investor can do in complete investment life as a whole.
Thanks for that, Vishal. There are some other points to which we'll come, but Anand, just getting you on this, the do's part as well. And the first of the points that you're mentioning, I've heard pros and cons for this, goal-based investing or goal-based planning. Now, why do you recommend this?
See, I personally believe that without having a goal, investing, it is like going on a war without having a goal plan, without having a strategy. I know it is very easy to say that goal-based investing is very easy. I know it is easy, but it is not simple to apply. We have to be very sure that we have a proper goal-based investing in mind. Secondly, without investing without a goal is like going on a walk without knowing the final destination. So the initial step and the first step of any financial plan has to be a goal planning. And goal planning is required not just because I am saying it or not because someone else is saying it, but goal planning is required because every investor needs it. It's the need of the hour for every investor. It is the starting point which we have to take care of.
Yeah, and well, there are enough and more people who actually swear by that phenomenon as well. Maybe it's actually an incentive to stay invested even during the tough times. So in that case, it could actually work in a positive, in a much bigger positive fashion than not doing it that way. Anand, your second point is mapping the right investing to right time horizon and right asset. I mean, what do you mean by this?
I basically mean that it is also somewhere linked to goal-based planning. So, for example, if our goal is in near term, we have to map it with a debt product or a liquid product for that matter. And if our investment time horizon is more than 10 years, then only we should go after equity. So, if we don't have that goal in mind, we really don't know that whether we should use a debt product or an equity product or which is actually the right asset class for an investor. So what I have seen is many of the investors have their money parked in maybe FDs or a fixed instrument type of products. These are investments which are there for maybe around 10 years or 15 years. And they come to equity share market to become millionaires or maybe billionaires overnight. So this is something which we have to take care of. Everything which we invest has to be based on a time horizon, which we have to decide before investing. And we have to make sure that we are sticking to that time horizon during the complete cycle of investment.
Okay, I guess which is why your point number 3 is giving it time, because time is your best friend. But I'm the interesting bit is also the consistency in mindset and investment. Now, what do you mean by this, Anand?
Consistency in mindset means a simple thing. When we start investing, we have a time horizon of maybe 10 years or maybe 15 years for that matter. But whenever there is correction in equity share market, our time horizon gets shifted from 15 years to 15 days overnight. Even we don't know that we are shifting our complete mindset. For this, I'll again try to put one point in Indian space or an Indian equity share market or an Indian investment lifestyle. Every investor is a loss-averse investor. They are ready to take some risk, provided that their investment or their portfolio is not in negative. This is one point which we have to take care of so that their consistency in mindset is always there and they stick with their time horizon. and to ensure that their complete portfolio doesn't go negative, or maybe even if it is going negative, there's a slight justification and they have a portfolio behind debt portfolio which is taking care of their volatility part. We have to make sure that every investor have a good amount invested in debt fund, and proper asset allocation is followed, keeping his goal setting in mind.
Yeah, it's very important. And Anant, you saying that while you don't, and I'm sure you agree with what Vishal is saying, but you have a view that if an index fund, for example, comes off by 20-30% or 30% is the number that you've given, then people should do a lump sum investing. Doesn't that that would not be a norm, right? You'll probably need to study the fundamentals of the sector before you decide to do that.
Yeah, absolutely right. We have to study the fundamentals. But there is one thing which I want to point forward. Every time there is a correction, we feel that I will do bottom fishing, let market correct some more, then I'll put some lump sum investment. Whenever market is correcting, everyone knows that there is an opportunity out there. But how many of us are able to actually crystallize it? I really doubt that thing. So for that, we need a rule. Rules always work. Emotion never works. What happens is when we have rules in place, we always make sure that we are following that rules. One such rule can be whenever index is following 30%, 30% correction will always come whenever there is some severe bad news in the market. So obviously there are chances of market correcting more, but we do not know what is the bottom of the market, like what just happened in March. But as a rule, if we have a rule in place that whenever market corrects by 30%, I'll try and put some lump sum amount. It will completely depend on person to person what amount of lump sum he or she is putting. But some lump sum amount can always be placed whenever there is a 30% crack in the major index. Maybe like if Nifty is correcting by 30%, obviously there is some big reason because of which this correction is coming, and there is a lot of fear in the market. At that time, it is really not possible to invest if we don't have our rules in place. So one such rule which I always follow is, and which I always suggest everyone to follow, is have a strong conviction on growth story of India, on the equity market of India, and make sure that you invest some amount of lump sum whenever there is a 30% correction in equity share market.
Okay, well, we have done about 15-20 minutes, so the do's were very important. We'll try and give a quick perspective on the don'ts as well. I think there are a couple of common points here, and I'll come to you first, Anant. Not giving too much of importance to the recent returns. I think that's probably the cardinal sin that most people tend to commit. Quickly, do a large proportion of your clients do that too?
This is one point which every investor tend to do in his or her investment life. For example, I am a big follower of equity markets, and I always suggest that some allocation should always go into equity funds. But I don't want investor to allocate equity funds just because it has performed in last four months or 5 months. Seeing a short-term time horizon and deciding on the basis of short-term time horizon is one mistake which many of us tend to do. The same mistake was committed while investing in gold. When gold has already given over 60% return, many investors were trying to chase gold and thinking that it will continue to give this 60% return lifelong. We have to understand that whatever return asset class gives in long term, it is the return which is probably possible in next few years, versus emotion always says that what has happened in last 1 year will continue to happen forever. We have to make sure that we do not do this mistake and this recency bias.
Well, pertinent point. Now, Anant, amongst the don'ts, we already spoke about recency returns. The other bit is setting wrong return expectations. Care to elaborate a bit on that? We have about 2 or 3 minutes left, gentlemen, so let's make it a bit quick.
See, I basically always believe that we should always have a realistic returns in mind. And whenever we are investing in equity, especially, we have to make sure that we set that 12% returns in mind. But at the same time, we have to make sure that this 12% won't be coming on an yearly basis like it comes in a fixed deposit or in a debt fund. There'll be volatility throughout this complete cycle. There'll be years when there are super good returns, versus there'll be years where there are underperformance in any of the mutual funds. So we have to always be ready for this volatility, especially when we are investing in equity. At the same time, we have to make sure that we are investing in debt and not ignoring debt as a whole, because that will give stability to our portfolio.
Got it. Now, I won't mention this overreaction to corrections point, because Anand briefly has already touched upon it, that if there is a correction, then invest into it and don't get out of it. But Anand, last 2 points of yours, which is the herd mentality, which people typically tend to do in stocks as well as probably funds, and the reality of following blindly the reality of 100 minus age rule. Can you talk about point number 5 in particular?
See, there's a very famous rule which everyone kind of follows, that 100 minus your age is the amount of equity exposure which you should have. I really don't agree with this rule. Suppose there's a 30-year-old young champ who has a home loan and who has even committed to some debts, short-term debts which he has taken, and then he is investing 30%, 70% in equity. I really don't think so that it is relevant for him. Goal planning, financial planning is something which is very personalized. When it is personalized, we can have some basic general rules, but generalizing asset allocation can be very dangerous and very harmful to long-term investing. And second last point was the herd mentality. I don't want investor to come into mutual fund and invest just because nowadays he or she is hearing everywhere that mutual fund sahi hai. He has to himself assess that whether a product is useful for him. If it's not useful, then they can probably avoid it also. But they should not invest in any of the asset class for that matter, just because their friend are investing in the same asset class.
Okay, gentlemen, I hope these do's and don'ts are taken up seriously by some of our viewers, at least if not all. But I'm sure it's helpful in more ways than one. A bit of a ready reckoner in about 28 odd minutes. Both of you, thank you so much, Vishal and Anand, for joining us today on the Mutual Fund Show. Thank you very much. And viewers, thanks for tuning in to this leg of the show, and happy investing.